First question to you, Shaba, like what got you into photography? Like I've seen your photographs and it's like mind blowing. And I don't think you went to any college, correct me if I'm wrong, and everything is self-taught. Like how did you get into it?
Everything is self-taught. Oddly enough, I told this story actually like yesterday as well because I was just talking about photography and stuff like that. Oddly enough, I started photography because I was actually, funny enough, I was jealous of another person that had the photography equipment. I met up with a buddy, a couple creative friends of mine when I moved down to South Florida. This wasn't something that I wanted to do in the beginning, but I ended up doing it once I moved to South Florida. As Ragu previously told you, I was bartending. So I was doing more of just bartending, social butterfly, trying to find my wits and doing different things. At the time, I was still doing, like funny videos here and there. So, the camera was always somewhere in the realm. It just didn't grab me as of yet. But what I did do was I had a buddy of mine that I would, fairly, he's still a great friend of mine, but we would end up shooting, small little stories, little videos, little photos, and it just kind of just intrigued me every time. And it got to a point. I even wrote the date down. I have the date written on when I got fed up. I got super fed up because I had a million ideas coming. And at the time, they would be like, "Ah, man, well, we don't have time to do that." And I was like, what the fuck, bro? Like, this is like a fucking, at the time, we all think our ideas are the greatest. So I was like, oh man, this is like one of the greatest fucking ideas in the world, bro. Like, what do you mean you can't let me borrow the camera? So it got to a point where, I wouldn't have access to the camera. So that really pushed me into, okay, well, I need to go get my own. So whenever I need to do it, I don't have to wait for anyone and I don't have to sit around and, try to wait for anybody, basically. So it really started off when COVID happened. That's before that. Like I said, I was doing projects. I borrowed I bought a camera from a really good friend of mine, which was like an old school, like Sony A77, like old school. And I was just started shooting. I was shooting whatever I could. I shot people, I shot birds, I shot trees, buildings, everything that you could think of. And I just was intrigued with it. And the camera itself, it did what it needed to do in the sense of, I guess, giving me a soft entry into photography. And after 2020 is when, COVID happened and I was actually furloughed from my bartending job. So I ended up getting stopped from the job, and after the job stopped, I was like, all right, so I mean, like, what are we gonna do? We're just gonna sit down and wait for for it to come back, or are we gonna get up and try something new? So, oddly enough, we ended up getting a stimulus check. That stimulus check that everybody ended up getting. I took mines, and that was like my first investment in when I bought a Sony A7 III. Still my camera to this day. I haven't switched it out, but it was the camera when I did my research. It allowed me to do both video and photo because at the time I was way more into writing skits and I was way more into making videos and music videos, and I wanted to do stories and all of these things. Now I've kind of landed in the photography lane just because when you get into creativity, you never know where you're going to really land. You just have to just keep going and keep going and keep going until you get to the position that you really want. So whether or not you're doing video editing or making graphic designs, or if you're just taking photos of dogs, if you're taking photos of real estate and you plan to go somewhere as far as like making movies or writing or directing or staging, all of those things, as long as you're within that parallel creative universe, you'll get there. But all of those things that I've learned, I think I'm rambling a little bit, I'll get back to you, Ragu, but I've learned all of those things play a major part in your completion as a creative, because all of the little things that I've learned from Photoshop to using Premiere Pro to doing Canva graphics and all of those things, now I'm able to just tap into it and just put it all together when I do my photography or videography, or if I'm writing an ad or a commercial for something now. So, in a nutshell, it started by being jealous of somebody not giving me their camera equipment. So I said, you know what? this. I'm gonna go get my own stuff. I'm gonna get my own stuff, and I'm gonna start doing my own stories and start doing my thing. So, I think the biggest lesson from this little ramble I went on is don't wait for anybody to do what you want to do. Just get up and get it done.
That's one thing that I've always, loved about you, and I've always learned from you and gotten inspired from you, because we have worked on a lot of projects. And I mean, I'm not a negative person. I try to see like more of being more realistic. And I'm not saying you're not realistic, but when we come up with a script or something, and I'm like, how do we do this? You're like, goo, I'm there. I'll figure it out. Don't worry. And you're like, we're talking about like, two people shooting each other, and how I'm thinking, how are we going to shoot this? You're like, I'll figure it out. Like, yeah, that I feel like you're that go getter, and you don't say like, I cannot do this. You're like, I don't know how to do this, but I'll make it happen. That's one big learning that I've always learned from you, and I've always tried to be like you when it comes to like, movies or writing or even going and achieving something.